I found some scripture that was like, I don't know if it's Bible scripture, just like old scriptures that said like he addicted himself to his spirit, devotion, whatever it might have been. And obviously over time, it's become kind of a negative connotation, but think about that, right? I mean, devotion is addiction. You're devoted to your thing. And that's, to me, that's terrifying.
Hello and welcome to Liberated Lyfe podcast, where our mission is to inspire and empower you to free yourself. I'm Lindsay, and today I'm here with my friend David Hahn. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you for having me. I got really nervous as soon as you started talking. I was fine before, but I'm now nervous. So
that's how it goes, man. David is a tax attorney. He lives in Wichita, Kansas with his wife and children. And he and I met when I lived in Wichita through some mutual friends. And today, David is brave enough to share his journey and his battle with depression. And in doing so, inspiring us to liberate ourselves from our own minds, which I think is probably one of the most important things to liberate ourselves from. So thank you, David, for coming on and for being brave enough to share your story.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for taking my text and be like, yeah, let's do it. I mean, and your listeners will now know that I run some of my own podcasts about Wichita and other things like that. So podcasting is definitely natural to me. And as an attorney, I talk for a living, even if I'm a tax attorney, a very boring tax attorney. And so I got pretty good at it between talking for work and for podcasting, and I have fun doing it. But yes, I'm excited to share some of my story today. I'm kind of coming on the outside of everything that I've gone through, and so it just feels good to just be able to kind of reflect back on it. But they always say check on your funny friends because they're the ones that are kind of they have the problems, and that's always spoke to me just because I'm definitely, the funny friend. I'm very rarely anything but serious. I mean, I guess I'd be a little serious today, but check on them because, yeah, you never know.
I love that you said that. And I didn't even know we had this connection, but that's, yeah, absolutely been a core part of my story too. My son's dad committed suicide. He was a very funny person, and he often likened himself to like a Robin Williams. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I definitely see that thread between actually the funniest people are the most depressed sometimes.
Oh, and absolutely.
Yeah.
I think about you wanted me to kind of just talk a little bit about my upbringing. I was born here in Wichita. I'm an only child. I was raised by two older parents. I wouldn't consider them elderly at the time, but they were older, late 30s, early 40s, kind of when I was born and being raised. And then I lived in a very affluent household. I mean, I was very fortunate to grow up the way I did, but I do think that I kind of took on humor at a very early age or just being outgoing in general as kind of that shield. And I don't know why. I mean, maybe if I did more digging, I could really discover why. I think I'm past that point. But I have very, very, very vivid memories of being on the playground and feeling like if I don't put on a happy face right now, somebody's going to ask me what's wrong with me. And I don't like that. And it's the same today. I mean, even, if I'm at all tired or just out of it because I've had a long day and my wife's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm great. And I'm like, but am I? I don't know. It's been kind of an interesting journey figuring that out and realizing that of myself. And I was going to say, I've discovered as of late, and none of this is in my notes, by the way, this is all off the dome. I discovered as of late that I refer to myself kind of as an extroverted introvert. An ambivert, because if you know me, if you've met me, if you spent any time with me, you would be shocked to find out that I really am an introvert. I'm very outgoing. I'm very in your face. Let's have a great time. I'm the life of the party. But in truth, that is just kind of the shell that I put on just to get by and just to kind of live my life in what I would consider a way that society agrees that I'm, part of their society. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah. So tell me about, your journey with depression. And I, first of all, I can relate. I struggle with depression myself, so you're not alone there. And us both being lawyers, it's very common for lawyers to struggle with depression. Not all of us admit it though. So cheers to you and I on that. But yeah, where did this all kind of start, and tell us about this journey?
I think most attorneys are too proud to admit it. But, that's another story for maybe part 2 of this podcast. Yeah, I want to preface this whole thing with, I'm not a professional at this in any way. I am in therapy. I read things. I listen to things. Like, this is all based on just like opinions and things that I've seen. But yeah, you've already kind of talked about it, but I want to talk about this concept of liberating yourself from your own mind. I think that we don't realize a lot of times that our mind kind of puts us in these shackles that you just kind of live your life and just kind of move on, and you don't really realize what's going on. So I actually had therapy this week. It was good timing because we actually delayed this podcast by a week, and I would have missed therapy, or I would have had therapy. And I mentioned to her that I was coming on this, and I told her what it was called. And you'll enjoy that she got some props. She was very impressed that it was called Liberated, like the word liberated being used in there, because she was like, it's interesting she didn't choose freedom. And I'm like, yeah, that is interesting because I don't want to get super political or anything like that, but like freedom doesn't always seem to be the same connotation as it probably should be. But she just loved to use the liberated. And so it actually kind of controlled most of our session on Tuesday, was just kind of talking about like what that meant to me and just kind of in the context of where we're heading. And so she had me define what like liberated means to me. And so we talked about things like it being light, flexible, expansive, positive self-control, reasonable, unlimited, not just fully unlimited, but just reasonably unlimited, and just having access. But we talked about kind of what the opposite of liberation probably means. And, the opposites of those words: weighed down, controlled, boxed in, limited, no real room, a caged animal, and trapped. And so she said, what's one... Say what?
Depressed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, right. And then depressed, or she asked me, sum that up in one word. I said contained. And she's like, that's a good word. She's like, to me, it means oppressed. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And I told her, I made the joke because, again, funny guy. I was just like, as a white male, I've never really dealt with a lot of oppression in my life.
Only from yourself.
Only for myself. But she made the point, and, I agree with it. There is an argument that anyone that feels like they're in kind of that oppressor state, like place, like a white male would, we are also oppressed into thinking that that's the way life should be, right? We should have these thoughts and feelings that drive how you oppress others. And just, I don't know. We talk a lot about the man, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I love her. If she's watching, I might send it to her. If she's watching, she's great. She's not going to put me in her book, she says, whatever. But she is a very powerful, intense woman, and I love her. She has definitely, saved my life in many ways, created this life that I have now, that I feel comfortable being here and talking about it. But really, that word oppression is interesting because, like you've said with the depressed and all that, you kind of are gaslighting yourself into following these shackles that I talked about earlier, and just kind of the way your mind leads your body, and just fights with itself. So I do want to talk a little bit about kind of the depression. I'm going to use some pop culture today because I'm a pop culture guy. But I wanted to start with, as we've already said, that I'm depressed. I go to therapy. If anyone's watching this or listening to this and you don't go to therapy and you're thinking about it, I would encourage you to go. I think it's fantastic for anybody that, I think anybody needs it. I don't think there's anyone that doesn't need it. I will caution that if you go, I do suggest you be as vulnerable and open and honest with yourself and your therapist as you can be, because I've been in therapy with other therapists where I was not honest and I got nothing out of it. It took me moving to my new person. I've been with her 7 or 8 years, and just being fully open and honest led me to kind of where I'm at now. But, we talk a lot of things at therapy. One thing that we've kind of talked about as of late that I think fits in this as well is the addiction cycle, and just kind of like how you kind of fall in and out of the cycle and getting into being addicted to different types of vices, if you will. We all have them. And I'm not going to get super deep into them. I'm going to talk about kind of one of mine a little bit, but the one thing that was interesting to me was part of the cycle was this concept of impaired thinking or cognitive distortion. And that's kind of the lying to yourself, right? Gaslighting yourself into thinking, oh, you're good. Or even to the point where you're not good, but that's just what you deserve. It's just kind of lying to yourself. And it's kind of a scary thing, right? Because, you think about, like, I love that people say the brain is interesting because it's the only thing that named itself. That's kind of what it is, right? It's like the brain is just, it's it's your captor. You can't fight it sometimes.
Yeah.
You think about you're coming out of like a deep sleep and you're kind of half dreaming and you can't really control that dream. I mean, that's what your brain is all the time. You just don't realize it.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting to think about that and the bad choices that kind of come from that and then lead to depression, addiction, whatever stems from there.
He's a tricky little motherfucker.
Yeah, it is. And what's an interesting thing about the word addiction? Do you know what it comes from? Like what word it comes from?
No.
It comes from the word devotion. Yeah. Back in the day, it was like a positive thing to be like addicted to your work, your devotions. I found some scripture that was like, I don't know if it's Bible scripture, just like old scriptures that said like he addicted himself to his spirit, devotion, whatever it might have been. And obviously over time, it's become kind of a negative connotation, but think about that, right? I mean, devotion is addiction. You're devoted to your thing. And that's, to me, that's terrifying. Yeah. So I kind of was telling you before we talked about this whole podcast, me basically telling you to put me on the podcast, but you being so generous and bringing me on, it coincided well with kind of my own personal liberation from my mind. I've gotten better over time. I mean, I'm not as nearly as depressed as I once was, thanks to therapy, my wife, my kids, and things like that. But I still have struggles. And I think I will always have struggles, but I started realizing that I need to make some more positive changes. And so you're like, what do you want to talk about? And I'm like, I don't know. And so I started thinking about it, and I was up late till like midnight one night because I couldn't stop thinking. I had this idea. I'm like, I've got the perfect thing to talk about. And it coincides with like how I want to be a better person. And so, I can kind of mark when I started working on this podcast with kind of my new journey, as I'm calling it, to get me to this point. And so I've said it 1,000 times, we're going to start with depression. And here we are. And I think depression is probably different for everybody. I'm sure there's a lot of similarities there. I already mentioned that my depression has decreased as of recent years. I still am impacted by it. There still happens. I mean, for me, when I get really like exhausted and tired, which is all the time because I'm very busy, I can feel it creeping in and I can feel the problems. Now, I wanted to read something that I heard once. I wrote it down like probably 7-8 years ago. It was probably about the time I had started therapy. It might have been before. I heard it in a sermon, and I thought it was just super interesting. It was the way that they described depression. So I'm going to read it to you. Being scared and tired at the same time. The fear of failure, but no urge to be productive. It's wanting friends, but hating socializing. Wanting to be alone, but not lonely. Caring about everything and then caring about nothing. It's feeling everything at once, then feeling paralyzingly numb.
God, that hits.
I heard that, and I don't know, I can't remember if I had started therapy or not yet. I'm pretty sure I had not. And I heard that and I'm like, ugh, that's me, right? That's what I'm feeling. And I know that I'm having a problem. And I had other problems at the time. I mean, it wasn't the only reason I went to therapy, but it was a main thing that I needed to talk about. I needed to figure out what my problem was, or I don't know if you call it a problem, but what I can do to better myself.
I love that. That very similar for me. I feel like when I get depressed, it like creeps in so slowly that I don't even realize that I am depressed until it's too late. I had a period over the winter. It seems to hit in winter often for me, where I really wasn't socializing very much at all, and I would just get in my head. I wanted to like be healthy, right? And like, focus on my personal development and do all of these things, but that led to me just being holed up in my house all the time, not seeing people. And then I realized, you know what? I'm taking myself a little too seriously here. And when I forced myself to get out and do things with friends, I felt better. Imagine that. But I also got into therapy myself. So,
right. I mean, that's the terrifying thing. You don't realize it because your brain doesn't let you realize it. You're just living it and you just move on. And next thing you know, it's years. And that's at that point, I think this was probably 2017. At that point, I was like, man, this has been my life for like as long as I can remember. Here's the other problem for me, because I was always fortunate when I battled my depression. I put fortunate in air quotes. I've been described as somewhat of an anal person. I prefer to respond that I'm fastidious, possibly a little neurotic.
You're a lawyer. I mean, I get it.
True. I'm always the kind of guy that my brain, which is ironic because my brain did both things. It would give me depression and not want to get out of bed, but it wouldn't let me not get out of bed. So every morning when I was dealing with these things, I would wake up in just, a depressive state, but I would tell myself, you need to get yourself up out of bed because I had to. I mean, I've always been an overachiever. I think it's the product of only child, affluent parents. Both my parents had graduate degrees. It's one of those things that I always knew I was going to college, and I kind of always assumed that I was going to go get a postgraduate degree. And I remember very distinctly, I was getting ready to go to college. I just graduated high school, and I was talking to a friend of mine from a different state, and she asked me, what are you doing next year? And I said, I'm going to Oklahoma State. I'm really excited. And she responded something to the effect of, like, that's really, like, good for you, David. Like, I'm really proud of you. They're going to college. And in my mind, I was like, what else would I do? And I forgot that, like, that's not something everyone can do. It's not an option for everybody. Even if it is an option for you, sometimes you just don't do it, or you do it, and then it doesn't work out. And so I've been fortunate that I've been able to do these things. And it just kind of, I think I've had it from an early age ground into me that I'm going to be this successful, it wasn't lawyer at the time, but successful business person who's going to just do great things in life. And my brain every morning said, hate yourself, but also get up and go. And thankfully it did, because it got me to where I'm at today, and it, kind of put me in a place that I could be successful even while battling through some of these things.
I get that. And I've had that experience as well, where it almost compounds the depression because, I'm very similar to you. Like, going to college was never even a question for me. And you and I are born into these lives that are, from the outside, we have it all. And so it's like, what do you mean you're depressed? What do I mean I'm depressed? I have everything. Like, it makes it worse because it's like, pick yourself up. There's so many people who have it worse than you. What are you talking about? And it's just like, what's wrong with me? Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing in society that we have to deal with. And yeah, people are probably like watching this or listening, like, woe is you guys, like, you guys are attorneys, but woe is us. Like, we have problems. We just have different problems, I guess.
Yep.
And speaking of people that have problems, I mentioned I wanted to talk a little bit about pop culture today. I want to start with a television show that, from what I've heard, has been regarded as the most accurate depiction of depression on television. And that show is a show called BoJack Horseman.
I haven't watched it yet. I've seen it.
I haven't watched it yet.
Reference it. Okay.
I got no spoilies today. No spoilies.
No spoilies.
There's minor spoilies in a book series I'm going to talk about here in a second, but there's no spoilies for BoJack. But Dean, are you familiar with the concept of the show at all? What it is?
I can picture like the horse head in my brain, right, but I don't know what it's about really. So give me.
And again, this is no spoilers. You find this out in the first 5 minutes of the show. And it's not only been out and aired, it's been out, aired, and it's done. So you're behind the power curve. Big time. But it's a fantastic show. Highly recommend. One of the best theme openings that you will find. But BoJack Horseman is the concept sounds really silly, and it seems really silly, but BoJack Horseman is a horse man. He has a horse head, but he's an animal body. And he lives in a world where there are people like you and me that are just humans. And then there are people that are animal heads and bodies. And the concept of the show is BoJack Horseman starred in a decently famous 90s sitcom called Horsin' Around, where he raised 3 human kids. And that was like his one-hit wonder. He did that. He was famous for like a really long time, and then he just kind of crashed. And so we follow him, in more current days of being this washed up actor trying to get his life back. And it's really, really funny, but it's also like really, really, really smart. Like, you watch it and you're like, wow, like that was a really intelligent joke. And it's got a lot of great like running jokes throughout the series, and there's a lot of really big name people in it. Like, really big name people voice a lot of these characters. In fact, some of them even voice themselves, like as if like played by them, because he lives in Hollywood, But my point is is it's a great depiction of depression and watching this character go through depression like firsthand, right? You'll watch him like just completely shut down and just sit there, or just like, do drugs and alcohol, or just do things you shouldn't do. And he literally, I haven't watched it in a while, but he literally like will say things to himself like, you're fat, I hate you, like to himself, right? I mean, he deals with his own brain of much of what we're talking about today. And a lot of the characters in the show deal with it as well. And there's one episode, and again, there's no spoilies, but I just thought this was amazing. The entire episode is him giving a eulogy for 20 minutes long, giving a eulogy where he just depicts all these like things, and it's very, neurotic and over the top. But that's all it is. It's literally him talking for a monologue for 20 minutes, no cutscenes, no nothing. It's just a very well written show that really, it the kind of show that like I always wanted to have a drink next to me because you're so depressed watching it. But it's some serious stuff, but it's also hilarious, and it kind of helps you, wrap your head around like what people deal with in depression, and it may even speak to you a little bit. I mean, I have memories of, I think it came out like 2014, 15. So I mean, even as early as 2015, I remember sitting here being like, that's a little too close to home.
It humanizes depression, which is ironic because he's a horseman, but
that's a great point. I didn't even think about. He is a horseman. He's voiced by Will Arnett, who's got a great voice. But there's just a lot of really great actors and people and written, and it does great. And I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit like what that means to me, and the concept of just like telling yourself that you're worthless, you're not worth it, whatever it might be. I think that this can apply to a lot of different vices. I mean, I think it can apply to any vice that I'm about to talk about, but I'm just going to talk about food. Again, you can do anything, but for me, it's like one thing I've dealt with is like food, right? It's like going to work in the morning and just feeling down and like stopping at Spangles and picking up a couple breakfast sandwiches, and you don't need them. You're not hungry. Or running out an errand and just grabbing a burger because you're just there. And for me, like it's one of those things like you're on your way there. You're telling yourself that you're fat, that you don't need to eat it because you're fat, and that, you recognize that there's a problem. That's the terrifying part for me. You recognize in your mind, you don't need to be doing this. I'll literally tell myself, don't do this. This is stupid. You don't deserve this.
Anyway. It's like a shame cycle.
Right. It is. And your brain's like, you don't deserve this. But then your brain's like, but no, you do, because you're fat and you hate yourself and you're depressed, and this will make you feel better. It never does. Right. And that could be any vice. It could be alcohol, it could be gambling, it could be, sex. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It's just, you fall into it and it just becomes a problem until you recognize that it's a problem, until you make those conscious decisions to stop doing it. And I think it can even be healthy things, right? I mean, you hear of runners who they run and run and run, and running's not, I mean, there's arguments if it's good or bad for you, but running extra miles because you think you need it, right? It's just, yeah. So
restricting food because you hate yourself. I mean, anorexia, but I think food is a particularly hard one because you can't avoid it. You have to eat it to exist. It's, you don't have to drink alcohol to exist, although that one's a hard one as well because it's everywhere. But certain addictions are easier to avoid or take yourself out of that situation. Food.
Yep.
Always there.
Sex is the only sin that you have access to.
The 7 deadlies.
Of all the, like, it's sin, commandments, all the things. Like, it's the only thing that you have access to. Maybe it was commandments. I don't know. I don't remember. If she's watching this, she'll yell at me. But I mean, theoretically, you can have sex before, obviously, but you can get married, you can have sex, you can do whatever, and it's not inherently a bad thing as compared to all the other things like, adultery and all that stuff. Like, it's the only one that and the food's the same way, like you said. We have to eat it. You have to nourish yourself in some way, and you can abuse it. I mean, just like you can abuse anything else.
Yeah. Particularly the part that stands out to me the most and that I relate to is the process by which you're recognizing, I don't need to do this. I don't want to do this. I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then it like we said, shame cycle, where I feel like that adds to the depression because it's like, it reminds me of Fat Bastard. He has the quote, just like, I eat because I'm fat, and I'm fat because I eat, or what's this? I don't know.
Something like that.
So relatable.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's right. I mean, you don't deserve this. You eat it, and then you're like, well, I shouldn't have eaten it because I didn't deserve it. And like, it's just you never stop. And then you just eat more, and then yeah, it's
And then if you rebel against the brain, or you try to fight it, or you try to fight the impulse, sometimes it makes it even worse than if it's like, yeah, you know what, I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm gonna do it, and so I might as well enjoy it. And like, that's a hard thing.
It's a hard thing. And speaking of rebelling against your brain,
Yeah.
that takes me to kind of my next segment, my next pop culture reference. We started with kind of the bad part, the depression. Now we're going to look at kind of the journey, if you will, moving through it. And my next pop culture reference I want to talk about, which is probably the least popular of the three I'm going to talk about today, is a book series called The Stormlight Archive. Are you familiar with The Stormlight Archive?
Never heard of it.
Most people have not. It's a book series by a fantastic author, Brandon Sanderson. If you've never read anything by Brandon Sanderson, I'd highly recommend reading him. I've read through 2 of his series, and this is the 3rd one I'm on. I'm currently reading Stormlight Archive. I listen to it. I don't read it because I read for a living, so I don't read outside of work. And to give you a little more incentive to possibly read the Stormlight Archive, the 2nd book in the series, which is called Words of Radiance, is the highest rated book on Goodreads.
Wow.
The highest one. If you go type in highest books on Goodreads, the number 1 book is one of these ones from the Stormlight Archive, which the 2nd book's a good book. It's not my favorite that I've read so far, but it's a good book. But if you go purchase his book, one of those, they have the little testimonials. One of the testimonials is Brandon Sanderson is not a good high fantasy writer. He's just a good writer. And it's amazing because I don't know, do you know the difference between low fantasy and high fantasy?
I don't.
Low fantasy takes place, it's like fantasy takes place on Earth, so like Harry Potter.
Okay.
High fantasy takes place somewhere not Earth.
Got it.
And so this is, a completely different galaxy, Cosmere. Well, it's called the Cosmere, wherever it takes place. And there's some magical elements throughout it. There's like some things, but like the stories that he creates throughout these books are unbelievable. He's created these characters that are so flawed, so broken, but they're so beautiful. And I once saw a TikTok that said, like, it's like the number 1 or like one of the top books you will ever read series that you just like want to stand up and like cheer when the characters like get their redemption and like make it. It's true. I listen to them when I walk. I mean, my Fitbit starts pumping that my heart rate is, it's hyped. So I'm like, yes, I'm like crying. I mean, I literally will be crying on walks, like listening to these books. Like they're absolutely incredible. It's an amazing series. But what's great about the series, I mean, it's high fantasy. We would have to spend like 3 podcasts of me explaining what the plot is.
Okay, we won't do that.
I cannot even begin to describe in the amount of time we have what the plot is. It is
okay.
It's out there.
It's a grand adventure, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's a grand adventure. But the characters that you deal with, here's some of the mental illnesses and issues that they deal with. Depression, PTSD, loss, addiction, trauma, anxiety, there's suicidal thoughts. And then there's a very interesting one, and that is dissociative identity disorder. It's wild. Like this high fantasy. I mean, you think of Harry Potter, or I've read Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, like there are elements to that, but they're not like what he has created. There's also some talk.
Their perspective when you're reading it.
It's all from their perspective. And then it's also from the perspective of the people dealing with it, like dealing with them. Every book, every chapter is a different perspective from somebody. So you see both sides of the story. And yeah, I mean, like you literally, like with like the dissociative identity disorder, like it literally is a person who believes they're more than one person, and it like is in that mind. And like I didn't even put the one on here too. There's one too that it deals with somebody who has been paralyzed. He like in his preface, he like thanks people that like have helped him like understand these like disorders or impairments or whatever, so that he can write about them accurately and from a place of like education. And that's cool to me. Like you're listening to this, you're like, that's what somebody's dealing with. It's nuts. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about not the book, but just some of the messages from the book. Minor spoilies, but not really. I think you will have no idea what I'm talking about. And if you ever go read the book, some of these spoilies won't even like resonate for like 3 books. So
Okay. They'll forget it.
You will forget by then. So there are certain oaths that these characters have to take. Then they're one of these oaths that they have to take, the most notable one, is the following: life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. You can probably imagine that I am going to fixate on the journey before destination for this discussion, but life before death, strength before weakness, those are both powerful sentences or phrases, if you will, as well. Mm-hmm. The first book in the series is a book called The Way of Kings. And I love when books do this, but the book, The Way of Kings, is a book within the book. It's a text that the characters use. It was written by kind of this old king who gives like these parables on how to like live your life, and everyone uses that, how to live their life. And he has this like long kind of discussion about like this journey where he walks from one city to another, and just kind of like this journey that he lives through. So it's interesting. But then the other important quote in the book, at least to our discussion, there's a lot of great quotes, is a question that is asked of one of the main characters. And I'm going to ask you the question. What is the most important step a man can take? Or a woman, but what is the most important step a man can take?
The first step.
See, that's what he thinks. But it's not. Okay. The most important step is the next one. It's always the next step. Which again, falls right back to our talk of the journey. Say that again?
I said the first step only happens once, but the next step is always happening.
Right. And so the next step's always happening. In fact, I have, this is unrelated. Emily and I had like a date night once, and we made like little inspiration boards or
vision board.
And I have on here health journey.
Yeah.
Which at the time was more of like just for my health, but it's kind of funny that we're talking about that. It just sits right here next to me at my desk here at home.
It's the next step.
The next step is the most important one. And it's interesting because I take that with this journey that I'm kind of on right now of making that conscious decision to take that next step, to fight back every day and to be better, to meet your goals, to go after your goals, meet your goals. And you may never even hit your goals, right? It's just kind of it's the journey. It's enjoying the journey on the way to get there. I suppose that death is our final destination. You have little destinations on the way. Well, I should say final destination, Earth. I did write down on Earth, but regardless, that is a severe destination. It's going to happen to us all in some fashion. And there's little destinations along the way, but then it's this concept of enjoying that journey all the way there and not just waiting till the end. I'm 33 years old. Like, why do I want to wait till I'm 70 to go live my life?
Right.
And then who knows? Average age expectancy is like 76, which is an interesting thing, by the way. Average age expectancy, I believe, is 76. And they say that retirement age is like in your 60s, when in reality, your midlife crisis is 38.
That's funny you bring that up. That's like a major theme that's existed throughout this podcast is, liberation can be from this American dream concept of work till you retire, then enjoy life when you're too tired to do it. I think our generation is like, the jig is up, guys. We've seen our parents try to do that and it ain't working out very well. So I don't know about that. I think we're going to try and enjoy the journey.
Right. Exactly. And shout out to my mom. She just retired this year. She's 71. And she's lived a pretty good life, at least seemingly. She's gone on a lot of cool trips. We've done a lot of really great things. Her and I've done a lot of cool things together. But she just retired at 71. And I'm like, I don't want to retire at 71. I would love to retire at 50 if I can. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
For people, that works for some people and they love it. Yeah. And that's totally fine. But I think as our generation is kind of waking up to maybe that's not how it should be for everybody. Yeah.
What's also difficult and something our generation, I think, is dealing with is this concept of it's really, 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 really hard to be an adult.
What's that?
Actively choose to be an adult.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Especially as you know, when you have a child or children, it becomes a responsibility that, no one gave us permission to be parents.
Yeah.
That's what Emily and I joke about all the time. It's like, no one said you guys are good to go. And we're not.
I remember leaving the hospital and being like, wait, what? What do I do?
Like 2 days. You have to literally get up every day and be like, I'm going to be an adult today. You have to choose to get up early before the kids get up to get stuff done, or do your laundry, or cooking for the third time in a week instead of eating out, or whatever. You have to make the right decisions, and your brain, again, doesn't want you to make those decisions sometimes. It wants you to sleep in a little bit, or laundry can wait, or you know what, it'd be great if we just got sushi. That's usually our problem around here.
I mean, that's like the biggest problem ever. But
That next step, right? Every little step you take toward being an adult, that's living your life, and that's being an opportunity. For me, I was tired of kind of feeling like in this trance, like I was glued to my phone or unmotivated to spend time with my wife and kids. Like I want to be active in my kids' lives. Like I want to be there. I don't want to just be in the room. I want to be active. I want to play with them. I want to constantly date my wife and like try to like every day like build our relationship, because we once were young and in love, and we're still, I think, middle-aged ish and in love. But it's so different.
yeah,
It's so different when kids get involved, when life gets involved, when responsibility gets involved. And so kind of this journey that I've been trying to work on as of late, one big choice that I've made as of the last few weeks is I'm actually actively keeping away from my phone, social media, things like that. Like I don't mind getting on social media. I'll maybe get on my computer, but like if anyone's watching this that like has been sending me Instagram reels, like I'm sorry, I haven't watched them in like weeks, because I just
that is a thing lately. I get so many reels all day, and I'm like, I can't possibly watch all of these. I'm so glad you brought this up. I just downloaded this app called Minimalist phone. I just downloaded it like 2 days ago. It has helped me so much to just be more conscious about when I look at Messenger, when I look at reels, when I still look at them, but I'm like, okay, this is my time for this. Whereas before I was just mindless.
It's absolutely mindless. You spend hours. I mean, I'm not a perfect parent. Like we'll stick our kids in front of the TV and I just sit there and they're watching Coco Melon or whatever. And I'm just scrolling on Instagram for an hour while they watch it. Like we're all just running our minds. And it was getting to the point where I felt like uncomfortable about it. And so I just stopped doing it. When I go to this is a little TMI, I go to the bathroom, I leave my phone out of the bathroom now.
With your poops.
Exactly. Presently poop. But it's like the first thing I do in the morning, like I usually when I wake up, I try to go for a walk before anyone's up. And so first thing I do is I don't check my phone. I just grab it, throw on my book on tape, and I go.
Wow.
I've tried to, it's a hard one.
Morning. That's a hard one.
I've tried to tell myself no social media at all before 9 a.m., even on the weekend. And I'm seeing a lot of like actual like real life things. I mean, I've only been doing it for maybe just under 2 weeks, but I'm feeling more productive at work. But the big one is my attention span is repairing itself like immensely. Like I am comfortable sitting for like 30 minutes without looking at anything and just sitting there. And the first few days I was not. And I had to like literally put my phone in another room and just sit there. But now, like, yeah, I could just sit here for 30 minutes and just think. And at first I'm kind of like, oh, this is kind of bad. But then like 10 minutes goes by and I've been like mindlessly thinking about stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's not so bad. And yeah, now like when I get like, I go on Instagram, like Emily will send me a reel. And so I'll go check that. But then I'll see like 5 reels a friend sent, or like just my stories or things. And I'm like, I'm exhausted thinking about watching even one. And so to me, I'm like, that's a positive choice that I've made that I'm going to probably keep with. And I'm finding more fulfillment with my kids too. Like, I mean, we've been a lot more playful. I'm really working on trying to just drink less, eat better, working out. But it's tiring. It's tough. And, but I'd remind myself, okay, David, you're on a journey. I pray every morning about a lot of things, but every morning I pray, like, help me have my next step on today's journey. And then at the end of the night, when I pray, thank you for this journey, just in general. And so it's kind of that back and forth. And every day I have an opportunity to take the next step. Some days they're forward, some days they're back, but I just try to do forward more often than not. Even if the day before was back, the next day it's all right, let's take that step forward, because that next step is the most important step.
Yeah. It sounds like this mindfulness thing too speaks to the other tenet, strength before weakness, because it's like really becoming aware of where is my attention going, and how can I guide myself to make better decisions day to day, to be more disciplined in a way, but just more mindful.
When you say that, because my next paragraph of my notes is literally, it is hard with kids. It is hard to be 100% strong 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So you say strength, that's true. It's impossible. It's hard not to crumple under the weight of it all. I mean, I'll give you my detailed schedule of my life usually looks like, but like the overview of it is I'm usually up at 4 a.m. I'm up at 4 a.m. I exercise, work out, do what I need to do. By 5 a.m. I'm working. I work from about 5 to like 6:30, 6:45. I walk the dogs. I help Emily get the kids up for the day, get them started. I'm back on by 8 a.m. And then I usually work through lunch, and I try to be off by 3, so that I can spend time with my kids. And then from 3 to 7, it's like kids, dinner, baths, doing all that. And then finally by like 7, kids are hopefully down, clean the house, do the dishes. And we're usually sitting down by like 7:30, 7:45. But we go to bed at like 9:30 because, again, I get up at 4 o'clock. So I get like an hour, maybe an hour and a half every day to just unwind. And it's exhausting. And so when I get to the weekends, I'm exhausted. And that's pretty much my every day. And but it's great. I mean, it's a lot, but I'm thankful that I've been thankful. This is my 3rd job since having kids. And I'm thankful that all 3 jobs have been flexible enough that I've actually been able to spend some time with them. Like I'm around, like I feel like I'm a fairly present father. I mean, I was there for, I think, at least my first 2 kids' first steps, like especially the first steps, like that, your baby, like your only child, like I was there, and I've been there, and I've been able, and the flexibility has been nice too, because I can help Emily with things. Like we can make things work.
That's awesome. And I love the concept of like time blocking for depression specifically, because I've learned kind of throughout my journey too, that there are little hacks for your brain to, like, at the end of the day, if you can check certain things off the list, like, oh, I did that today. I did that. And dopamine, boom. I did what I said I was going to do for myself, and building that like integrity with myself, the opposite of the shame cycle. I did what I said I was going to do today, and I feel good about that.
Over the 4th of July weekend, I took that Friday off too. And so I had a 4-day weekend, and I had a list of things that I wanted to accomplish. And we make lists all the time and we never accomplish them. And I'm determined to do it all the time. And like, if anyone knows me, I am the least handy person you will ever meet. And so I've made a mission of myself. Like my new hobby is being more handy, and like being more like just willing to take projects on. And so several of those projects over 4th of July were like handy projects. And I got all the handy ones I got done. There was a couple that I didn't get done, but we decided that they could wait. But yeah, it's that conscious decision of just trying to better yourself. So anyway, I want to move on to my final point of kind of like the other side of this journey, right? You're coming out of you're always going to be in your journey, but just kind of coming to the point, kind of more where I'm at today, of feeling better about yourself, feeling healthier. And I want to talk about that through music, and someone who, in my opinion, is probably one of the most underrated songwriters of our generation. So somebody you probably have heard of this artist. You probably know his music, but you probably don't know as much of his journey as at least I paid attention to, because I'm obsessed, but that's me. And that would be Mike Posner.
Okay. Yes. Cooler than
me. Right. Yeah. Exactly. I was hoping you'd say that, because that was his big song, right? He came up with the song Cooler Than Me. He has written songs for, like, he wrote Boyfriend for Justin Bieber. He wrote Sugar for Maroon 5. Like, he's written some pretty good songs that you would probably know, but Cooler Than Me was his first one that he wrote. He wrote it in his dorm room. He was somebody I really looked up to, because he was making beats in his dorm room, and I was like, I want to be that. That needs to be me. He's way more talented than I'll ever be. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this, his life, at least from my perspective. This is kind of, again, my perspective, my analysis of what I've seen. I think it's pretty spot on. It may not be 100% accurate. If you're listening to this pose, let us know that I messed up if I said anything wrong. But yeah, Cooler Than Me, it was written, it was recorded, and there was 2 different versions. There's kind of a more like simplistic version that has Big Sean on it, but then there was a remix that blew up, and it blew up, right? I mean, that was the song of the summer. Everyone knows that song. People still... Yeah, people still bump to it, and it was like, up here. And he was the big man on campus, literally, because he was in his dorm room. But then, as you know, like a lot of, I mean, at the time, I guess you could consider it a one-hit wonder. I would argue it wasn't, but he was high on life, high on drugs, high on everything, and then it came crashing down. And he wrote
Or BoJack Horseman.
BoJack Horseman.
Okay.
He wrote a lot of music, though. I mean, there's several albums and mixtapes out there that just never made the light of day. I think they're fantastic. I mean, he remixes. He does like, I shouldn't say remixes. He covers a lot of really like famous songs in really unique ways, and to the point where like one of his best songs that he covers is Adele's "Rolling in the Deep." Another really good one that he does is like Halo, Beyonce, but "Rolling in the Deep," I like went and saw him. He was at the Tulsa State Fair. $8 to get into the fair, and the concert was free. And I'm like, to see Mike Posner, shout out my boys Ty and Scott. We went to the concert together, and he played the Rolling of the Deep, and it was unbelievable. It was so cool, but very talented. And then he kind of like was coming out of that, from what I could tell, and I think he kind of was getting sober and figuring things out. And he wrote a song called "I Took a Pill in Ibiza."
Oh, yeah, right.
Right. And again, if you listen to the original version of "I Took a Pill in Ibiza," it is an acoustic, it's like an Americana acoustic version, and it's very sad, very slow, very sobering. Like the lyrics are very sad. They're just about how he like couldn't control himself when a song blew up, and how he like would sleep with women, and he couldn't, like, he would just like, leave in the morning. And here's the part that drives me nuts. The literal chorus says, "All I know are sad songs." That's the literal chorus. But what happened is it got remixed again. I'm sure with his consent, gets remixed, blows up, huge number, big party song, played at the clubs. I have a distinct memory of being in Houston, Texas, as if there's a lot of other Houstons out there. I was in Houston, Texas, and that song came on, and everyone's hyped. They're singing the song, and they're singing the lyrics. All I know are sad songs, and they're just, drinking and hanging out. And I'm like, like it's wild to think about.
Programming going on in the music industry that a whole other episode there, but
yeah. And so, it's nuts. So one of his more recent songs, which I think is hilariously named, is "I'm Not Dead Yet." Because again, what happened to this guy, this Mike Posner guy? He was so big, so he wrote "I'm Not Dead Yet," which I think is a great song, obviously, but it's a great song about emotions. And it ironically did get remixed. It didn't blow up quite as, I know, it didn't quite blow up as much, but the song itself, the original, is unreal because it's kind of this upbeat pop song, it's like, and it's got some of the heavier lyrics, but then it goes into the chorus, and the chorus is like this, like, acoustic guitar, like very upbeat, like very happy sounding. You're like, this is a feel good song. And the lyrics are, "This is what a sad song sounds like. It's been playing in my life, or it's been playing in my head for my whole life. It's beautiful and cruel at the same time." And in the second part of the chorus, there's this great beat, this very steady beat that comes in. And the lyric is, "And this is what a broken heart beats like. It's tearing up my chest like a jackknife. It gets me through the good and the bad times." It's just this very, like, again, check on your funny friends. Like, yeah.
I was just having that realization as you were talking, David. I was like, holy shit, this is full circle to this remix represents your journey in being this happy face, but underneath it, the lyrics are saying, "I'm fucking sad."
Exactly. And it's just in your face. And you're like, great song. I mean, like, but wait, is it? Now, I kind of preface this with, this is kind of the coming out of your journey, or at least coming into a better place. I would argue, from at least what I see on social media, Mike Posner is a much better place than he's been ever. I mean, he posts, and he's very open about, he just posted like a couple days ago about all of the vices that he's cut. And he had you could go check it out. He had every amount of time, alcohol, sex, drugs, just everything. Like, he had how long he's been sober from them. And in 2019, he walked across America, which he came through Kansas, and Emily and I spent 3 hours trying to find him, and we could not find him.
Driving around.
Yes. And we were just like we were newly engaged, and we could not find him. And it was just, it was a whole thing. So he walked across America. He got bit by a rattlesnake during his walk, went to the hospital, recovered, and finished his walk. And then in 2021, he climbed Mount Everest.
Wow.
And yeah, he's just like, he's constantly trying to like spread positivity and love and tell people it's going to be all right. And he has one kind of important message that he uses a lot that, again, ties in everything I'm talking about. And that is the message of keep going. All of his posts always have keep going. And I just think that that's right there with moving on with your journey, right? The next step, it's just keep going. I always tell myself, besides take that next step, I say, all right, you're good. Keep going. You keep bettering yourself every day, being, for me at least, the person you want to be. Journey before destination, keep going. The most important step is always the next one. So if I could leave your listeners with anything, it's one message: just keep going. You're not alone in your struggles, and you can make positive changes every day to enjoy your journey. That's it. Those are my notes.
You're not alone. You got both of us right here on that journey with you.
Exactly.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, David. And then your podcast that you have in Wichita with Andrew is called Wichita Podcast.
Wichita Podcast. It's
Okay,
a history of.
Is it that obvious? Yes,
it is that obvious. Yeah, it's.
These two, they're funny. They're pretty funny.
Thank you.
I recommend it.
It's just a history of Wichita. So if you've ever been to Wichita or the area, or even if you just want to learn, I mean, there's some things that started in Wichita that you like, Pizza Hut or White Castle, that we've done episodes on, that you could still get some value out of. Another podcast that I do, I haven't done it in a while. I need to yell at my sister-in-law, but I think it's probably our greatest podcast. It's very funny. She doesn't live here, so we struggle with it. It's called Siblings in Law. I'm 12 years and a day older than her. Our birthdays are one day apart. She was like 3 minutes away from having the same birthday as me. And it's just, she just graduated college, but it's been through like her turning 21, and just like, we're so different in our lives to where, I'm married and I have kids. She's trying to figure out her life, and her and I, like, she's very too cool for school. Like, the fact that she even has a podcast with me blows my mind, because like, that just describes what the podcast is. But like, the two of us would never have ever interacted in any way. She's a bartender, so maybe if I would have gotten a drink at a bar, but we would have never interacted in any way if I hadn't married her sister. And so that's kind of like the foundation of it, is like these two people that like get along really well, but like should have never met.
The odd couple.
Right, exactly.
I love that.
We haven't done one in a while, but there's like 6 or 7 episodes. They're pretty funny. So
I love it. Well, thank you so much, David. You're thebomb.com.
Thank you. Thank you. This was a lot of fun, and maybe we'll do a part 2, and I'll tell you all about the Stormlight Archive.
I would love to. And maybe not all about the Stormlight Archive. We'll see.
Okay. We'll see.
Maybe I'll read it first, and then I'll.
Please do. I am begging anyone to read it and talk to me about it. I have no one to talk to about it. My wife won't touch it. So anyway, it's good. It's a good story. If you can get past the high fantasy, it's a good story.
I bet my partner in crime, Cody Westerland, who's a frequent guest on this podcast, he's super into fantasy novels. So I bet you he's either read it, all of it, or heard of it. I'm going to ask him. So
I think at least heard of it.
Yeah. I'll have him hit you up if so. And he is a thinker. So you guys jam.
Perfect.
All right, everyone. May the source be with you. Over and out.